Hi, my name is James Arvanitakis. I'm the Dean of the Graduate Research School here at Western Sydney University. Welcome to our ethical research videos. In his second video, we talk about ethics to a group of researchers who advise you on the processes that they follow and some tips that they can give you.
Ethics approval or the ethics process isn't just about ticking the box. It's really about thinking about how research is used in a way that can actually improve, whether it be health or science or any type of outcomes. And in the process of doing an ethics application, you actually start to think about how it is that we talk about certain things, how we engage with certain ideas. And I think it actually develops a researcher as a kind of agent for whether it be social change or advancement or innovation. And ethics then becomes a vehicle in that sense. And that application process, which really asks you a lot of questions where you start to be able to think about, how do I understand these ideas? How do I want to get them across? And that carries on in your research itself, as well as in your writing and in other aspects where you begin to develop outside of this tick box process, but this is a catalyst for it.
So when you first think about ethics, there's a few things you should have in place. So one is some background in the area. The ethics committees don't want you researching something that's been researched 1,000 times before. So you need to know that you're doing something unique and novel. You should probably put forward a protocol, which is the journey a participant would go on. So you would approach them in what way, you're going to ask them questions either over the phone, face-to-face, in an online survey. So really put forward the journey, and then once you've got that data, what's the journey that data will go on? So if you can map out the process that you expect it to take, then you're a long way towards understanding how you can then go and answer the questions in an ethics application.
So my advice to any student approaching an ethics approval process is work closely with your supervisors. Don't do this on your own. Don't think you know it. Don't go off and submit it without it being reviewed and having assistance. The other thing that I do with my students is I get them to look at other ethics submissions. So I give them copies of other ethics submissions. I give them copies of flyers and demographics and consent and information sheets. And that helps them enormously in being able to put together the ethics approval. But I would never, ever expect my students to do it without help. Talk to other students about things that they've learned. Never be frightened to ring up the ethics office. They're fantastic and they help with all sorts of things. The other thing is when we submit an ethics application, often they'll review it and they'll pick up where we may have missed out on things. They'll send it back and we can quickly fix that so we don't have the delay on the other end. So it's a really important part of being a student, but you don't have to do this on your own.
What do you want your final product to look like? What do you want your thesis to look like? And where are you going to gather that data from? And it might be lots of places. It might be the literature, it might be experts in the field, it might be fellow students, it might be the community. You might go and just observe people without actually interacting with them. All those bits of information, if you write them up for your thesis, you really do have to think about at what point may I have changed or interfered a situation that I've gathered data, whether it be observations, conversations, numbers, facts and figures. At what point have you intervened that you have been a presence there that you wouldn't normally have been in order to get that data? And if you are placing yourself in a position to get data, then you probably need to be getting ethics to do that.
So the important piece for all students to remember, and all researchers in general to remember, is that ethics approval processes, ethics clearance, whatever you want to call it, is actually a positive step. That is actually something that allows you to reflect upon what you're doing and how you're engaging in your project. This is helpful. It should be viewed as constructive. And on the other side of the coin, it should be treated as an opportunity for learning. Those who are engaged in providing ethical clearance also need to treat it in that positive sort of way. If we create a context where ethics is a burden, where it's a sort of step that you have to go through and nobody really wants to take into account, then I think we're not sort of taking full advantage of ethical considerations. We need to treat it as a positive step in research and treat it as an opportunity to learn how to enhance our research so as not to affect others in a negative way.
So I would ask a supervisor in the first instance, if that's your first protocol for your research, I would ask the supervisor what type of methods they have used and how has that gone down with ethics, how they have prepared their ethics applications, if you can get some examples of what ethics applications look like, if you can get some information, things to read about, videos to watch about how to prepare ethics, the things to think about, these type of videos, these type of resources to really start to manage potential dilemmas to plan out your time.
Okay, so I think when undertaking or considering to undertake a process for ethics, there's a number of steps, and some of them are quite boring or quite sort of obvious. One, for example, is to give yourself plenty of time and actually give yourself time to reflect and think about what the process you want to follow. The second thing is don't think of ethics as a form, but as an approach. Think about it as a philosophy. So when you're approaching a subject that you want to research, think about what is the most ethical or the way that you're going to engage with the people you want to interview. And I think that's key. Once you get that sorted, once you get that philosophy sorted, then actually going through the form process is quite simple. I suppose the third thing is, and this is across any time that you're thinking about approaching ethics, is to work really closely with your supervisor. Be very, very clear so they can understand what you want to do and what they expect from you. Your supervisor's there to guide you, and so the last thing you want to do is kind of do a whole bunch of things and then go to them. You're better off approaching them and discussing with them really early, sorting out what you need to do, and then implementing. But again, I think key here is the philosophy, the approach that you take, rather than thinking about this just as a form.
You can seek advice from your supervisors, fellow students, more senior students in the laboratory, ringing the ethics committee and asking if you can have a meeting and talk about your project and what type of ethics they think that you might have. And there's online resources as well that you can read. So if it's STEM type research, the National Health and Medical Research Council has guidelines on ethical approval. The university has guidelines on what might be considered low or negligible risk, which you still require ethics for. So there's lots of resources out there. You shouldn't go into the process without being informed about what is required and what you should do next.
Obviously speaking to the ethics committee so that you can get a sense of what is acceptable and what isn't, as well as the times when there will be meeting, and get an understanding of whether your research falls into low risk and what level of low risk, and when you might have your ethics application reviewed. That way you can work backwards to think, okay, this is when I might want to put it in. I need to get these steps in place before that.
You have to outline potential harm to participants. Now that can be as simple as asking them a question that might make them feel uncomfortable, and you therefore need to have on hand people who could deal with any distress that is caused by those questions, all the way through to some medical intervention. So whether it's taking blood collection, taking photographs of the retinas of the eyes, getting them to spit in a tube to collect DNA. All these things are things that I've done in my research. And in each one of those, you need to actually, yes, acknowledge that it may have some discomfort and potential harm. And if that arises, what do you do with that? And how do you handle and what support do you provide those participants to make sure that that harm is minimised?
Some advice that I would probably give is that, obviously start early and have everything prepared. But I think sometimes students might perceive it to be a really scary process, and that it's, a big application, and they might fear that their application will be rejected. It doesn't work like that. The ethics committee, your supervisors, everyone's working with you in order to get the project approved so that you can carry on with your research and develop as a researcher. So there shouldn't be this fear that, it's all going to fall apart, because I've never had a situation where we weren't able to change something or amend something or do something a bit differently in order to make sure that our research continues. So don't be afraid. It's not a scary process.
Think about how your research is impacting others. So not just what you're going to get from the research, but actually the effect that your research will have. Treat it as a positive and treat it as a context where you can learn how to be a better researcher.
Don't think about this as a terrible, boring hurdle that you have to get over. Think about this as actually the heart of what research is about. Think about this as making you a better person. Think about this as protecting you and protecting those that you research. So don't think about this as just something that you have to do. This is a core part of learning to be a researcher. Don't do it on your own. Get help from your supervisors. Talk to your other colleagues. Talk to the research office. Don't feel that this is a journey that you have to undertake on your own. And thirdly, doing research is one of the most rewarding, inspiring, and wonderful parts of your life. So try and have fun. Try and enjoy it. Whenever you have a barrier that you come up against, which is really common as a student and really common as a researcher, try not to think of it as something that devastates you or takes away your hope. Break through it. Think of it as a challenge. Think about it as something that's going to improve you, make you better and stronger in the future, teach you skills. So, embrace it, don't fight it, and don't get despondent.